Dr. Selma Quint was having another one of those days. The kind where the universe feels like it's conspiring against you, but you can't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. It was Tuesday, which, as far as Selma was concerned, was just Monday's less charismatic, equally irritating sidekick. "We've got a problem," said Harv, the base's technician whose job description seemed to include, "state the obvious as a main duty." He leaned against the doorframe of her cramped office, arms crossed, his face a permanent fixture of discontent. Selma turned away from her screen, where the animated representation of what should have been a stable anomaly was spinning like a drunk at a wedding. "Let me guess," she sighed, "another electromagnetic storm blew out the sensors, or the coffee machine has finally declared mutiny?" "Neither," Harv replied, with the smug look of a man who just found a winning lottery ticket in the pocket of his least favorite shirt. "We've got some weird energy reading. And by weird, I mean, we're all probably screwed." "Ah, my favorite kind of problem," Selma said, standing up and trying to suppress a smirk. "The kind that involves impending doom. Lead the way, Harv." The research base was a metallic labyrinth, more reminiscent of a junkyard than a cutting-edge scientific facility. It was the best they could do out here on the armpit of the universe, funded by a government that spent more on office plants than on space exploration. Selma paced through the narrow corridors, dodging cables and the occasional disgruntled scientist. They arrived at the control room, which was buzzing with the sort of nervous energy you usually only find in hospitals and prison breakouts. Selma's team were huddled around a central console, eyes glued to the screens as if willing the threatening graphs to change their minds. "All right, team," Selma announced, clapping her hands together. "What's the latest way the universe is trying to kill us today?" "Dr. Quint, it's not just that the energy spike is unusual," said Alara, the physicist who somehow managed to stay optimistic despite all evidence that she shouldn't. "It's that it's consistent." "Consistent?" Selma echoed, raising an eyebrow. "In this place? That's more suspicious than Harv being nice before noon." Harv grunted. "You know me too well. We've been mapping the collision points of the multiverse," Alara continued, "but this reading suggests something." She struggled for the right word. "Alive?" "Alive," Selma repeated, letting the word hang in the air like a bad smell. "Well, that's just adorable. Maybe it's inviting us for tea. Or maybe it's a cosmic death ray. Hard to tell without better sensors. Or maybe it's both," Harv added dryly. "A nice cup of tea before obliteration." Selma leaned over the console, staring at the fluctuating data. "All right, people, let's start cross-referencing these readings with known energy signatures. I want to know if this thing's got a name and a favorite breakfast cereal by the end of the day. And if it doesn't?" asked Rook, the team's resident cynic and unofficial morale crusher. "Then we'll name it ourselves," Selma said with a shrug. "Maybe something classy, like the big cosmic middle finger." As the team dove into their tasks, Selma couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just another blip on their radar. The universe had a way of throwing curveballs, and she had become quite adept at dodging them. But every now and then, one would connect. Hard. Hours passed, the team digging through data like archaeologists at a dig site, each bite a potential clue to what lay beyond their comprehension. Selma moved from station to station, offering sarcastic encouragement and the occasional glare that told her crew she expected nothing short of a miracle. "Is it just me," Harv started, "or is this place getting creepier by the minute?" "It's not just you," Selma replied. "I think the walls are getting jealous of all the attention the screens are getting." "Brilliant," Harv said, shaking his head. "Haunted walls. That's all we need." Rook popped up from beneath a tangle of wires, looking like he'd just survived a wrestling match with an octopus. "I've got something," he declared, voice tinged with the kind of excitement you'd expect from someone finding a surprise appendix in their soup. "Do tell," Selma urged. "The energy signature, it matches one from the records. Anomaly 42 from the Z cluster incident, back in '09. "Oh, great," Selma said, rubbing her temples. "The infamous, oops, we almost ended the world incident." "That's the one," Rook confirmed. "So, we're dealing with something that's almost destroyed us before," Alara mused, her optimism waning. "How reassuring." "All right," Selma said, clapping her hands together again. "Let's not panic. Yet. Harv, get me a link to HQ. Alara, dig out all the data on the Z cluster. Rook, I need you to keep an eye on that signature. If it changes, I want to know before you even blink." The team scattered like roaches exposed to light, each to their task. Selma stood in the middle of the chaos, a general in a war that she didn't fully understand, but was determined to win. Or at least survive. Harv waved her over to his station. "Got HQ on the line," he said, handing her the headset with the enthusiasm of someone passing a live grenade. "This is Dr. Selma Quint," she announced, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Ah, Dr. Quint," came the voice from HQ, smooth as a politician's handshake. "Always a pleasure. What's the crisis du jour?" "We've got an energy reading matching the 2009 Z cluster incident," Selma replied. "And it's not going away." There was a pause that lasted just long enough for Selma to start feeling uncomfortable. "Are you certain?" the voice asked, with the kind of disbelief usually reserved for UFO sightings and Elvis impersonators. "As certain as a mathematician about basic addition," Selma said. "We need support." "Support is limited," HQ replied, with all the enthusiasm of telling someone they've just won a year's supply of lint. Translation: "You're on your own," Harv muttered from beside her. "Well, then," Selma said, taking a deep breath. "Guess it's time to improvise." Again, the transmission cut, leaving Selma standing there, headset in hand, feeling every bit as alone as she knew she was. She glanced around at her team, each head bent over their work, unaware of the near impossible task laid before them. "All right, folks," she called out. "Looks like we're going to be doing this one solo." Rook looked up, suspicion etched into his features. "HQ bailing on us again?" "Like clockwork," Selma confirmed. "Let's just hope this anomaly isn't as enthusiastic about killing us as the last one was." "So, what's the plan?" Alara asked, her voice carrying that stubborn note of defiance that Selma had grown to admire. "We do what we always do," Selma said, with a crooked grin. "We figure it out, and we make it work." The room settled into a determined silence, punctuated only by the sound of keyboards clicking and the occasional curse when something failed to cooperate. Selma stood in the center, the eye of a storm that threatened to tear their world apart. "Hey, Selma," Harv called, glancing over his shoulder. "Remember when we signed up for this gig, thinking it'd be a cushy research post?" "Vividly," Selma replied, smiling despite herself. "It's amazing what desperation and a lack of better options will get you." "Well, next time," Harv said, turning back to his screen, "remind me to read the fine print." As the hours ticked by, Selma felt an odd but familiar sensation. It was that mix of dread and exhilaration that came with knowing you were standing at the edge of something both terrifying and momentous. Whatever was coming, they'd face it together, armed with nothing but wits and a stubborn refusal to go quietly. And as far as Selma was concerned, that was more than enough. For now, Selma leaned over the central console like a general surveying the battlefield. Except this was more like playing chess with a blindfold on, and the universe was flipping the board every few moves just to keep things interesting. The data on the screen was an enigma wrapped in a riddle, gift wrapped with a bow of doom. "We've got a problem," Harv announced again. A master of stating the obvious, but at least he was consistent. "Another one?" Selma groaned. Did the coffee machine finally achieve sentience and decide to jump ship? "Worse," he said, eyes glued to his screen. "We've detected a breach in the multiverse. Something's peeking through." "The multiverse?" Selma echoed, as if saying it out loud would make it less absurd. "Great. Just when I thought today couldn't get more Monday than Tuesday." She scanned the room, seeing her team bent over their stations, looking more like a bunch of kids cramming for finals than highly trained scientists. Or maybe that was the same thing, now that she thought about it. "What's the breach showing us, Harv?" she asked, knowing full well she wasn't going to like the answer. He tapped a few keys, and the main screen lit up with an image that resembled a lava lamp having an identity crisis. "Meet the Vracs," Harv said, with the enthusiasm of someone introducing a fart in an elevator. "The Vracs," Selma repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sounds like a punk band from the 80s. "Could be," Harv said, "but I doubt they're here to drop an album." The image shifted, revealing a series of symbols and patterns that danced across the screen like a digital waltz. Selma stared at it, half expecting it to start playing elevator music. "What are they doing?" Alara asked, glancing up from her terminal. Her optimism had taken a backseat to curiosity, though the optimism was still along for the ride. "Looks like they're watching us," Harv replied. For all we know, we're the new sitcom in town. Terrific, Selma muttered, rubbing her temples. And here I thought my acting career was over. Rook chimed in, his voice as dry as a desert. So, we've got aliens who've breached the multiverse to watch us. What's next? A reality TV show deal? Don't give them ideas, Selma warned. The last thing we need is intergalactic studio executives. As they processed this new development, the team fell into a nervous silence, the kind that usually precedes the discovery of something either monumental or monumentally disastrous. Let's dig into this, Selma said, shifting into problem-solving mode. Harv, see if you can get a message through to them. Ask them what they want. And if they respond with total annihilation, Harv asked, only half joking. Then we politely decline, Selma replied, her face a mask of determination wrapped in a layer of gallows humor. Look alive, people, we've got aliens to negotiate with. Harv fiddled with the console, fingers dancing over the keys like an over-caffeinated pianist. A moment later, the screen shimmered and a new message appeared. It was in English, which was either a stroke of luck or a sign that the Vracs had done their homework. Greetings, humans, the message began, in a font that reeked of too many committee meetings. We are the Vracs. We observe your dimension with interest. We observe back, Selma muttered, with equal parts interest and terror. The message continued, unabated by Selma's sarcasm. We fear your capacity for empathy, a trait rare and dangerous in the multiverse. Selma blinked, taken aback. Of all the things she'd expected aliens to fear, empathy ranked somewhere below, running out of toilet paper. They fear our empathy? Alara asked, her voice tinged with a mix of disbelief and pride. That's what it says, Selma replied. Though why anyone would be scared of our ability to feel sorry for someone is beyond me. Rook snorted. Maybe they're allergic to hugs. Or maybe, Harv suggested, they can't comprehend the idea of beings who care about each other. It threatens their worldview. Selma considered this, her mind racing with possibilities. So, we've got interdimensional spectators who are scared of us because we're capable of giving a damn. Pretty much, Harv agreed. All right, Selma said, leaning back in her chair. Let's use that. We've got a weapon they fear, and it's not even sharp. So, what do we do? Alara asked, her optimism peeking out again, like the sun through storm clouds. We show them empathy, Selma replied. We show them that we're not a threat, unless they make us one. And if they decide to bring the fight to us anyway? Rook asked, ever the cynic. Then we show them just how terrifying empathy can be, Selma said, with a grin that would have made a shark proud. Harv typed up a response, carefully crafting a message that balanced diplomacy with a hint of menace. We understand your concerns, it read. Empathy is indeed our strength. But it's also our shield. We're willing to talk, if you are. The message was sent, and the room held its collective breath. This was the sort of moment that could change the course of history, or at least their little corner of the universe. Selma watched as the screen flickered, waiting for a response. Seconds ticked by, each one stretching into eternity. Then, at last, the screen lit up with a new message from the Vracs. We will converse. Prepare for contact. Well, that's something, Harv said, relief bleeding into his voice. They haven't decided to wipe us out. Yet, Selma echoed, nodding. All right, team, get ready. We've got aliens to chat with. The room buzzed with activity as everyone prepared for the impending contact. Selma stood at the center, feeling oddly serene in the eye of the storm. Hey, Selma, Harv said, glancing up from his station. You ever think we'd be here, negotiating with aliens about empathy? Honestly, Selma replied, I thought I'd be fighting a hostile coffee machine. This is a step up. The team chuckled, the tension in the air lightening. Even in the face of the unknown, humor held them together. It was a thin thread, but a strong one. As the last preparations were made, Selma allowed herself a moment of reflection. They were about to step into the unknown, armed with nothing but their wit and the terrifying power of caring. It was absurd, but then, what about this job wasn't? The time had come. The lights dimmed, the screens flickered, and the room filled with a gentle hum. Selma took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The central console pinged, and a holographic image of a Vrax appeared. It was a swirling mass of colors and shapes, defying easy description. Alien, yet oddly familiar. Greetings, Humans, the Vrax said, its voice resonating through the room like the low hum of a distant star. We are curious about your empathy. Selma stepped forward, meeting the alien's gaze, or at least where she assumed its eyes would be if it had any. We're curious about you too, she replied. Why does empathy scare you? The Vrax shifted, its colors blending in a way that suggested contemplation. Empathy leads to unpredictability. It fosters alliances, creates wild cards. It is dangerous. In a universe where everyone looks out only for themselves, Harv added, I guess that makes us the ultimate loose cannon. Exactly, the Vrax said. Empathy is a weapon unlike any other. It has no defined form, no limits. Selma considered this, nodding slowly. So, you're afraid we might use our empathy against you? Yes, the Vrax confirmed. And yet, there is a beauty in it. A potential for something more. Selma exchanged a glance with her team, seeing the same mix of awe and determination reflected in their eyes. This was more than they'd ever dared hope for. We'd like to explore that potential, Selma said. We're open to collaboration, to learning from each other. The Vrax shimmered, its form shifting into something that suggested agreement. We are willing to learn. Let us proceed with caution, together. And just like that, the room filled with a warm glow, a sense of hope amidst uncertainty. They'd taken the first step into the vast unknown, guided by the very trait that set them apart. As the contact ended and the room returned to its normal state, Selma allowed herself a small smile. The universe was unpredictable, chaotic, and often absurd. But today, they'd proven that even in the face of the unknown, humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to care. Well, Harv said, breaking the silence. Guess we've got a new assignment. Yeah, Selma agreed, her voice filled with the promise of what was to come. Let's see where empathy takes us next. With that, the team settled in, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. Together, they'd navigate the winding paths of possibility, armed with the most powerful weapon of all. Their humanity. Dr. Selma Quint stood at the epicenter of chaos with the kind of nonchalance that comes from knowing the universe actively disliked her. The research base clattered and hummed around her, like a disgruntled orchestra tuning up for a doomed symphony. Outside, the electromagnetic storms raged, as if the cosmos itself were having a particularly bad hair day. The multiverse breach was no longer just a pretty light show. It was starting to do things. Annoying things. Like threatening to destabilize Earth's reality. Which, all things considered, was a bit much for a Tuesday. Harv, true to form, was hovering over the central console, his expression a cross between confusion and mild panic. Selma? We've got a situation. Harv, if you start every conversation like that, one day I might just assume you're talking about lunch, Selma quipped, but the tension in her voice betrayed the seriousness of the moment. It's the Vrax, Harv continued, ignoring her attempt at humor. They're manipulating the breach. Reality's getting wobbly. Wobbly? Selma repeated, raising an eyebrow. That's a technical term now? Well, imagine if reality was a jello mold someone forgot to refrigerate, Harv replied. That's what we're dealing with. Selma sighed. Great. Just what we need. A universe that can't keep its gelatinous form. Isn't it beautiful? Alara chimed in, a hopeful smile playing on her face as she peered over Harv's shoulder at the console. Her optimism was like an uninvited guest at a funeral, awkward and strangely refreshing. Beautiful in the way a train wreck is beautiful, Selma muttered. Right, let's get cracking. If the Vrax want to play with reality, we'll show them we can play back. Rook, the team's resident cynic, leaned against a wall, arms crossed. And how exactly do we do that? Last I checked, we weren't exactly the masters of our own universe. True, Selma admitted, but we've got something they don't. A complete disregard for personal safety? Rook suggested. Close, Selma said with a grin. Ingenuity, and a really twisted sense of humor. Harv was already typing furiously, his fingers a blur across the keyboard. I'm setting up a loop in the system to stabilize our part of reality, at least for now. Temporary fix, Selma noted. We need something more substantial. We could try communicating again, Alara suggested. Maybe appeal to their curiosity. Great idea, Selma said. Harv, can you open a channel again? Already on it, Harv replied, not taking his eyes off the screen. Just don't expect a red carpet reception. As Harv worked his magic on the console, Selma turned to address the rest of her team. Alright, folks, we're going to negotiate with aliens who think empathy is scarier than a teenage girl's diary. Let's show them what humanity's made of. Broken dreams and caffeine? Rook deadpanned. Selma chuckled. Exactly. Now let's give them a show. The screen flickered, and the holographic image of the Vrax appeared once more, its form shifting like a kaleidoscope on a sugar high. Humans, why do you resist? The Vrax asked, its tone inscrutable. Because that's what we do best, Selma replied, folding her arms. Resistance is practically our species' middle name. And here I thought it was oblivious, Harv muttered under his breath. You mess with our reality, we get twitchy, Selma continued. We're open to discussions, but destabilizing our corner of the universe isn't a great way to start. The Vrax shimmered, its colors adopting a pattern that suggested faux innocence. We meant no harm, merely curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat, Rook said with a smirk. And last I checked, we liked our reality cat alive. Very well, the Vrax responded, its form shifting in what might have been an alien shrug. We will cease our manipulations for now. But our curiosity remains. And so does ours, Selma shot back. We want to understand you better. Let's work together, without turning our universe into a cosmic smoothie. The Vrax seemed to consider this, its form swirling in contemplation. Agreed. We will observe and learn, without interference. See? Alara said, her optimism shining through. Empathy can work. More like a mutual agreement to not screw things up further, Selma corrected, but she couldn't hide the satisfaction in her voice. Harv, keep monitoring the breach. Make sure they hold up their end of the bargain. On it, Harv said, his fingers already flying over the keys. Selma turned her attention back to the team. All right, people, we bought ourselves some time. Let's use it wisely. Ideas? How about we come up with a way to safeguard our reality? Alara suggested. Something permanent. Good thinking, Selma agreed. We need a buffer. Something that can stabilize the breach and protect our reality. Like a firewall for the universe, Harv said. Exactly, Selma replied. And we need to do it fast. The Vrax might be playing nice now, but who knows how long that'll last. Rook tapped his chin thoughtfully. We could use our own technology to create a feedback loop through the breach. Stabilize it from our side, make it harder for them to mess with us. Selma nodded. That could work. Harv, Alara, work on that. I'll coordinate with the others to get the equipment we need. The team sprang into action, a flurry of activity as they set about their tasks. Harv and Alara huddled over the console, working out the details of the feedback loop, while Rook and Selma gathered the necessary components. Hey, Selma, Harv called out, you ever think that one day you'd be doing tech support for the universe? Not exactly, Selma replied with a wry smile. But then again, life never really goes according to plan, does it? Like that time you tried making coffee and nearly blew up the machine? Rook suggested with a smirk. Exactly, Selma said with a laugh. Life's a cosmic joke, and we're just here to punchline it. With the plan in place, the team worked diligently to execute it. The hours stretched on, filled with the sound of clattering tools and the occasional curse as something inevitably went wrong. But eventually, they had something that resembled a functioning stabilization system. All right, Selma said, standing back to admire their handiwork. Let's see if this works. Harv activated the system, and for a moment, the room held its breath. The breach shimmered, its swirling patterns still chaotic but somehow more contained. More stable. It's holding, Harv announced with a grin. We're stable. At least for now. Good, Selma said, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. Let's keep it that way. The team exchanged weary but triumphant smiles. They'd done it. They'd managed to keep their reality intact, at least for the moment. And in the grand scheme of things, that was no small feat. So, what's next? Alara asked, her eyes sparkling with the thrill of accomplishment. Next, Selma said, we keep our eyes peeled for any more Vrax shenanigans. And we keep strengthening our defenses. Sounds like a plan, Rook said, nodding. But what about the Vrax? How do we handle them long-term? We keep talking, Selma replied. Keep them curious, keep them engaged. As long as we're learning from each other, there's hope. And if they get bored with us? Harv asked. Then we remind them why humans make such interesting study subjects, Selma said with a grin. We might be small, but we're packed with surprises. With the immediate crisis averted, Selma allowed herself a moment of respite. The universe might be chaotic, unpredictable, and downright hostile, but they'd proven that humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to adapt, to find humor in the darkest of times, and to stand together against the unknown. As the team settled back into their routines, the base a buzz of activity once more, Selma knew that they were far from done. The Vraks were still out there, still watching, still curious. And as long as they were, Selma and her team would be ready. After all, in a universe that seemed determined to defy logic and reason at every turn, it was nice to know that humanity could still hold its own. Even if it was with a laugh and a sarcastic remark. "Hey, Selma," Harv called out from his station. "I think I figured out why the Vraks are so interested in us." "Let me guess," Selma said, turning to face him. "Our innate ability to turn chaos into comedy?" "Pretty much," Harv replied with a chuckle. "We're like the ultimate reality show. Who wouldn't want to watch?" Selma laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh that echoed through the base. "Well then, let's give them a show they'll never forget." And with that, they got back to work, ready to face whatever the universe threw at them next. Together, they'd keep the lights on in the reality stable, one sarcastic quip at a time. The next day dawned like an old comedian's punchline, expected, slightly disappointing, but still somehow comforting. Selma found herself squinting at the central console, which buzzed with the subtle impatience of technology that knew it was smarter than the humans using it. "Harv," Selma called over her shoulder, sounding as if she'd just discovered someone had eaten the last slice of pizza. "Why is the breach doing the tango with our dimensional stability?" Harv wandered over, a cup of coffee in one hand and a look of mild existential dread in the other. "Because the Vraks are playing peekaboo with the multiverse again. They're trying to sever the link, but not before we all enjoy a little more cosmic chaos." "Great," Selma muttered, as if Mondays weren't bad enough. "Technically, it's Thursday," Harv corrected, sipping his coffee, a gesture of defiance against whatever lunacy the universe had in store. "Days have no meaning here," Selma said, waving dismissively. "Besides, every day is Monday when reality's on the fritz." Rook sauntered in, his usual look of disdain aimed at the universe in general. "Let me guess. The Vraks are back for another episode of How to Annoy Humans Without Really Trying." Selma nodded, gesturing to the screen where the multiverse breach shimmered like a disco ball having an identity crisis. "Feels like we're part of some cosmic sitcom, doesn't it?" "Yeah, and we're the dysfunctional family the writers love to torture," Rook replied, folding his arms. Alara joined them, her optimism unfazed by the chaos. "At least the breach is giving us something to bond over, right?" "Sure," Rook said dryly. "Nothing like existential threats to really bring people together." "You guys are a ray of sunshine," Selma quipped, her hands flying over the console as she attempted to stabilize their dimension once again. "Harv, can you boost the signal? Maybe we can knock on the Vrax's door before they turn our universe into a cosmic soup." Harv set his coffee down with the kind of resigned determination one might see in someone about to clean a particularly disgusting bathroom. "Boosting the signal. Let's just hope they don't interpret it as us flipping them off." "That would be accidentally appropriate," Rook commented. The room filled with the hum of machinery, a choir of clattering technology that drowned out the doubts lingering in the back of everyone's minds. On the main screen, the breach flickered, its swirling chaos slowly coalescing into something a bit more manageable, a visual equivalent of herding cats. "I think we're getting through," Harv said, his voice tinged with both relief and disbelief. "Showtime," Selma said, crossing her fingers in a gesture half humorous, half desperate. The holographic image of the Vraks returned, its form a kaleidoscope of colors that screamed, "Indecisive alien fashionista." "Humans, your persistence is noted. Why do you continue to resist our curiosity?" Selma leaned forward, arms crossed, her expression the epitome of, "Not today, alien overlords." "Look, we're all for sharing, but destabilizing our reality isn't what I'd call good manners." The Vraks rippled, their form suggesting something akin to alien amusement. "Our actions were not intended to cause harm." "Yeah, well, your curiosity is giving us a headache," Rook interjected, his tone as dry as a desert in a drought. "Any chance you could channel that curiosity into something a bit less universe-shattering?" "We wish to understand," the Vraks replied, their form shifting like a lava lamp on a sugar high. "Understanding is overrated," Selma said with a sigh. "But let's start small. Maybe a friendly exchange of cultural experiences? You show us yours, we show you ours, and nobody gets sucked into a black hole. A mutually beneficial exchange, the Vrax considered. This proposition is intriguing. Alara beamed, her optimism practically glowing. See, empathy does work. Or, they're just curious whether our sitcom-like dysfunction is worth watching, Rook muttered. The Vrax faded from the screen, leaving behind the static hum of the now stabilized breach. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. A temporary reprieve from the universe's relentless attempts to mess with them. Okay, people, Selma said, turning to her team with something resembling a smile. We've bought ourselves a little time. Let's not waste it. Any brilliant ideas? Harv asked, looking like a man who'd lost a bet with fate and was still processing the repercussions. We need to make our offer more appealing, Alara suggested. Show them the best humanity has to offer. They've already seen our worst, Rook pointed out. What's left? Hope, Selma said, surprising even herself with the word. We might be sarcastic, flawed, and perpetually sleep-deprived, but we also hope. Maybe that's what they need to see. Hope, huh? Harv mused. I guess we could give them a glimpse of that. If not for them, then for us. The team set to work, each member diving into their tasks with a renewed sense of purpose. The base hummed with activity, the clatter of machinery mingling with the sound of hurried footsteps and the occasional exasperated sigh. As Harv and Alara tinkered with the communication systems, Rook and Selma focused on reinforcing their defenses. If the Vrax were going to keep poking at their reality, they needed to ensure it didn't fall apart like a poorly made house of cards. Hey, Rook, Selma called over. What's the probability that we're actually entertaining some higher cosmic power with all this? Rook shrugged, not looking up from the tangled mess of wires he was currently wrestling with. Probably about the same as the chance of us getting through this without another existential crisis. So, not great. Well, existential crises build character. Or so I keep telling myself, Selma said, smirking despite the circumstances. Time passed in a blur of coffee-fueled determination and dark humor. Slowly but surely, the plan took shape, a broadcast of sorts, designed to show the Vrax the best of humanity. Or at least, the best they could muster under the circumstances. Ready for the big show? Harv asked, fingers hovering over the switch that would send their message out into the multiverse. As ready as I'll ever be, Selma replied, crossing her arms and hoping for the best. Let's show them what we've got. With a nod, Harv flipped the switch. The bass filled with the sound of static, followed by the hopeful strains of human music, a universal language, or so they hoped. Images of Earth flickered across the screen, moments of beauty and resilience captured in each frame. The holographic Vrax reappeared, watching intently, their forms shifting with what might have been appreciation, or maybe just bemusement. This is different, the Vrax said, their tone inscrutable. Yeah, it's called humanity, Selma replied, her voice steady. We're messy, complicated, and probably more trouble than we're worth. But we're worth a shot. The Vrax shimmered, their form suggesting contemplation. We will consider your proposal. Further observation is warranted. Looking forward to it, Selma said, offering a mirthless grin. With that, the Vrax disappeared once more, leaving the team in the quiet aftermath of their gamble. The stakes were high, the risks even higher, but they'd done all they could for now. Well, that was something, Rook said, leaning back and rubbing his eyes. You think they'll go for it? If not, at least we gave them something to think about, Selma replied. And maybe bought ourselves a little more time. Time's all we need, Alara said, her optimism unyielding. Time to show them what we're really capable of. Well, if nothing else, we've got a front row seat to the weirdest show in the universe, Harv added. Yeah, Selma said, looking around at her team, flawed, sarcastic, and somehow perfect in their imperfection. And we're not going anywhere. Not without a fight. The team settled back into the rhythm of their work, the bass alive with the sound of resolute endeavor. The plan was in motion, the stakes higher than ever. But they'd faced the chaos together, and somewhere in that mess, found a glimmer of hope. And in a universe as unpredictable and unfathomable as theirs, hope might just be the greatest weapon they had. Harv's coffee mug wobbled precariously as the floor beneath them shivered like it had just remembered it was supposed to be a trampoline. Alarms blared, flashing red lights turning the room into a disco for people with masochistic tendencies. Well, there goes the universe again, doing its best impression of my last relationship. Unstable and self-destructive, Harv said, clutching the mug like it was the only thing holding his sanity together. Selma was already at the central console, fingers dancing over the keys while her face wore its usual expression of, not this crap again. Status report, people, what the hell just happened? Alara, ever the optimist in a sea of sarcasm, managed to look on the bright side even when the lights were flickering ominously. Looks like the breach is having a growth spurt. A growth spurt? Rook shot back, voice dripping with his trademark disdain as he dodged a falling ceiling panel. More like a cosmic pimple that's about to explode all over us. Harv squinted at the main screen, where the multiverse breach pulsed with unnerving vigor, a bruise on the face of reality that was about to burst. It's not just a breach anymore, it's a full-blown gateway. Gateway to hell, more like, Rook muttered, a bitter edge to his words. Selma's eyes narrowed, their usual sharpness now an unyielding blade. We've got to shut it down before it devours us like a bad B-movie monster. Too late for that, Harv said, pointing to the screen where the Vrak's silhouette loomed large, a mess of colors that suggested a kaleidoscope on acid. Looks like they've sent reinforcements. Can't they just watch through their little cosmic peephole? Rook groaned. Who invited them to the party? Selma tightened her grip on the console, ignoring the way her heart was trying to drum its way out of her chest. Alara, get those defenses up. Harv, we need to reroute power to stabilize our systems. And what do I do? Rook asked, arms crossed, his gaze a mix of annoyance and resignation. Try not to die, Selma replied, her tone as dry as his. And if you have a spare miracle up your sleeve, now's the time. The bass groaned under the strain, the sound of metal protesting like an old man getting out of bed. Alara worked frantically, her usual optimism now tinged with urgency as she boosted the shields. We're not equipped for this kind of chaos. We weren't equipped for Mondays either, but here we are, Harv said, frantically adjusting dials and switches, his brow glistening with the sweat of someone who just realized they'd forgotten their homework 2 seconds before the deadline. Focus, Selma barked, her patience stretched thinner than an overcooked noodle. The Vrak's presence intensified, their curiosity now a tangible force pressing against the universe, and it felt like a teenager trying to peek into a carnival tent without paying. Humans, why do you resist? Our curiosity is infinite, because we're tired of being your science project. Selma shot back, her frustration bubbling over like a pot left unattended. Maybe find a hobby that doesn't involve shattering our dimension? The Vraks seemed to ripple with something akin to amusement or indigestion. It was hard to tell with aliens that looked like a Jackson Pollock painting. We find your resistance amusing. Glad we could entertain you, Rook said, voice laced with sarcasm. But we're not exactly enjoying the show from our end. A sudden jolt threw Harv off balance, his coffee mug finally abandoning ship and smashing against the floor. Damn it, not the coffee. Selma barely managed to keep her footing, her attention still locked on the console. Forget the coffee, Harv. Focus on the power grid before we all end up as cosmic dust. Right, Harv mumbled, his fingers scrambling over the controls like a pianist trying not to hit a wrong note during a recital for angry judges. A cacophony of alarms and the wail of overtaxed machinery filled the room, the base feeling less like a scientific outpost and more like a pressure cooker about to blow its lid. Alara's fingers danced over her controls, her optimism now wearing thin as reality itself seemed to fray at the edges. Selma, I don't know if we can hold this together much longer. Well, that makes 2 of us, Selma replied, her voice a gruff mix of resolve and desperation. We've just got to keep punching until something gives. Another jolt, more violent than the last, threw the team to the ground, the lights flickering like a dying star. For a moment, everything was silent except for the eerie hum of the breach, an ominous reminder of the universe's precarious balance. Is everyone still alive? Selma asked, pushing herself up, her voice steady despite the chaos. Sadly, yes, Rook grunted, pulling himself to his feet with all the grace of a cat that had just tumbled off a windowsill. Harv groaned, rubbing a new bump on his head. I think I left my dignity back in the last dimension shift. Count yourself lucky, Selma said, offering him a hand. At least you didn't lose your marbles. Assuming I had any to begin with, Harv quipped, accepting her help. The Vraks seemed to shimmer with renewed interest, their presence a constant pressure that was growing harder to ignore. Your determination is noted, humans. But our study of your reality shall continue. Selma blew out a breath, her frustration hardening into resolve. Not if we have anything to say about it. Great, Selma. What's the plan? Because I'm fresh out of ideas that don't involve running, Rook said, his voice heavy with sarcasm and a hint of hope. Selma's mind raced, the weight of their predicament pressing down like a lead blanket. We need to overload the breach. It's risky, but it's the only way to force them out. We could also just offer them a subscription to our misery, Harv suggested dryly. They seem to like watching us suffer. Ha, ha, Selma deadpanned. Very funny. Say we actually pull this off, Rook interjected, his skepticism sharp as ever. What's to stop them from coming back? Honestly? Selma shrugged. Nothing. But it'll buy us time. Maybe enough time to figure out how to close the breach for good. Alara, listening with earnest intensity, nodded. It's a long shot, but I'm in. Something's better than nothing. All right, Selma said, her resolve hardening like cement. Let's do this. They worked quickly, the room a frenzy of action and determination. Harv rerouted power, sacrificing non-essential systems in a desperate bid for the edge they needed. Alara pushed the defenses to their limits, the barrier barely holding against the Vrak's pressure. Rook, ever the cynic, provided a running commentary that was surprisingly motivating. You'd think the universe would cut us some slack, he muttered, yanking a panel open with more force than necessary. But no, we've got to scrape by with duct tape and desperation. Hey, at least we're resourceful, Harv countered, his focus absolute despite the chaos. The universe might be against us, but we've got coffee and sheer stubbornness. And a knack for finding trouble, Selma added, her fingers flying over the console as she initiated the overload sequence. All right, here goes nothing. Everyone brace yourselves. The bass vibrated violently, the lights flickering like disco strobes on the fritz. The breach pulsed and throbbed, a hungry beast that sensed its meal was slipping away. The team held their breath, the moment stretching out impossibly long as reality seemed to fray around them. Then, with a roar like a dying star, the breach imploded in on itself, the machinery screaming in protest. For a heartbeat, everything was chaos, a cacophony of sound and light that seemed to swallow the universe whole. And then, silence. Selma blinked, her ears ringing as the dust settled. Did we do it? Harv laughed, a giddy sound that bordered on hysteria. I think we actually did it. Or we're dead and this is the afterlife, Rook suggested, his tone deadpan as ever. We're too lucky for that, Selma said, her relief palpable even as she fought to keep her expression steady. Alara, ever the optimist, let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. We're still here. We actually made it. The Vrak's presence was gone, the breach sealed, for now, at least. The base was a mess of disarray and minor destruction, but they were alive. And on that note, Harv said, looking around the battered room, I'm getting another coffee. Anyone else? Sure, why not? Rook said, his voice a mix of sarcasm and relief. Might as well enjoy what little peace we've got. Selma nodded, a weary smile tugging at her lips. Yeah, let's savor the calm while it lasts. The team gathered, sharing a moment of camaraderie amidst the wreckage. They'd survived another assault by the universe and its inscrutable whims. A small victory in a never-ending battle that was far from over. But for now, they had coffee. And in a cosmos that seemed hell-bent on testing their limits, that was good enough. Harv leaned back in his chair, cradling his newly replenished mug of coffee like it was an ancient relic that might just offer salvation. You know, if the universe is a sentient being, I'm guessing it's the kind that gets its kicks from watching us squirm. Selma smirked, her eyes still glued to the central console. If that's the case, we're starring in its favorite soap opera. Despite the relative calm that had settled over the base, the room was still a mess of sparking wires and overturned equipment. Alara moved between stations, her optimism somehow intact, as if she'd just received an encouraging horoscope prediction. Can't believe we made it through that, she said, pausing to brush a strand of hair from her face. Maybe the universe is cutting us some slack after all. Don't get too comfy, Rook chimed in, his voice laced with its usual sardonic edge. This might just be the commercial break before the real show starts. Selma's fingers flew over the console, trying to pull up any data that might help them predict the Vrax's next move. We need to figure out what makes these cosmic critters tick. They can't be all chaos and no reason. Like the universe's version of teenage vandals, Harv suggested. Just smashing things 'cause it's fun. Teenage vandals or not, there's got to be more to their intentions, Selma muttered, frustration creeping into her voice. They can't just be doing this for kicks. Rook leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching Selma with an expression that mixed boredom and vague interest. So we find out what they want, and then what? Offer them a bribe? Maybe a fruit basket? Why not throw in a box of fancy chocolates while we're at it? Harv added, grinning. Hey, at this point, I'm willing to try anything, Selma replied, her voice dry. As she sifted through the endless streams of data, something caught her eye. A small anomaly that seemed to pulse rhythmically against the backdrop of the breach's chaos. Hold on, she said, her tone shifting from sarcasm to intrigue. I think I might have found something. The others gathered around, peering at the screen like a group of conspirators plotting a particularly elaborate prank. What are we looking at? Alara asked, her optimism now tinged with curiosity. This pattern, Selma said, pointing at the screen. It's repeating, almost like a heartbeat. A heartbeat? Harv echoed, skepticism draped over his words like a wet blanket. Are we saying the Vrax have hearts now? Not literally, you dolt, Selma shot back with a grin. But it suggests rhythm, a kind of structure. Which means they might have patterns, weaknesses. Rook's eyebrows lifted. So you're saying we can use this? What, to talk to them? Ask them to kindly bugger off? Not exactly, Selma said, chewing the inside of her cheek thoughtfully. But if they have patterns, they might have fears. Maybe even something they respect. You mean like the fear of someone stronger taking their lunch money? Harv asked, catching on. Exactly, Selma confirmed. It's a long shot, but if we can figure out what that is, we might have leverage. Great, so we're looking for the cosmic equivalent of a bigger bully, Rook said. Well, this just keeps getting better. Alara's eyes lit up with that inevitable spark of hope. If we can understand them, maybe we can communicate. Not with fear, but with empathy. Empathy? Rook scoffed, though his tone was more thoughtful than dismissive. You really think these kaleidoscope creeps know what that is? Maybe they don't, Selma replied, warming to the idea. But maybe that's why they're so curious about us. We're unpredictable, and if there's one thing bullies hate, it's uncertainty. So we're not just their playthings, Harv mused. We're their puzzle. Selma nodded, a plan forming in her mind. We need to initiate contact. Construct a signal using this pattern. Show them we understand there's more to this than just chaos. What do you need from us? Alara asked, eager to get started. I'll need you to boost the signal, Selma said, turning to Alara. Make sure it's strong enough to cut through the breach without getting scrambled. And what about us? Harv asked, gesturing between himself and Rook. Harv, keep an eye on the power grid. We can't let it blow when we're this close to an answer, Selma instructed. Rook, help me craft the message. We need it to be clear, concise. Make sure they know we're not pushovers. Right, Rook said, his usual sarcasm softening just a touch. Let's give these guys a taste of human tenacity. They moved to their tasks with a kind of fervor that only comes when you're standing on the precipice of something monumental. Alara was a whirlwind of efficiency, channeling power to the communication array while Harv monitored the grid like a hawk eyeing its prey. Rook and Selma worked side by side, crafting a message that was part warning, part invitation. You're sure this won't backfire? Rook asked as he adjusted the syntax of their signal. Nothing's certain, Selma replied, her voice steady. But if we don't try, we're just sitting ducks. At least this way, we have some control. And if it fails, we can always go back to running for our lives, Harv quipped. Rook grinned, the camaraderie a balm against the stress. Or we join the Vrax and make it a sitcom. Cosmic Chaos. The series. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Selma said, focus sharpening as she prepared to send the signal. All right, everyone ready? A chorus of affirmations echoed through the room, each voice tinged with a mix of hope and apprehension. Selma took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the console. Here goes nothing. She pressed the button. The bass hummed with energy as the signal pulsed out into the breach, the rhythmic pattern of the Vrax looped with human ingenuity and something they hoped would translate as understanding. They waited, the silence stretching out like the final nerve-wracking seconds of a bomb countdown in a bad action movie. Harv's eyes flicked to his coffee mug, as if contemplating how long it would take to finish it before reality imploded again. "Any response?" Alara asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Too soon to tell," Selma murmured, her eyes glued to the screen, watching for any sign of recognition from their cosmic observers. And then, slowly, the main screen flickered to life. The Vrax's chaotic colors began to coalesce into something more defined, more comprehensible. It was still abstract, a Picasso after a few stiff drinks, but there was an undeniable rhythm to the patterns. "I think they're responding," Selma said, a cautious thrill in her voice. "But I can't make heads or tails of it. It looks like they're attempting to mimic our signal," Harv noted, his surprise giving way to fascination. "Maybe they're trying to understand us too," Alara suggested, her optimism rekindling. Rook tilted his head, studying the screen. "Or they're just screwing with us." "Let's assume they're not," Selma replied, her mind racing. "If they're trying to mimic us, it means they're trying to communicate." "Well, if this doesn't scream first contact," Harv said, "I don't know what does." Selma's expression was a mix of concentration and hope. "We need to respond again. Reinforce that we're open to dialogue, not just passive observation." "You're suggesting a conversation?" Rook asked, skepticism threading through his voice. "With them?" "Yes," Selma replied firmly. "It's risky, but we might find common ground. And if they just see it as an invitation to waltz through our reality again?" Harv pointed out. "Then we deal with that when it comes," Selma said. "But right now, we have a chance to turn this whole thing around." "All right, I'm in," Rook said, a reluctant admiration in his tone. "Let's show these cosmic weirdos what humans are made of." Selma nodded, sending another signal, this time with more intentional patterns, trying to convey recognition and mutual curiosity. The base hummed with the energy of the transmission, the weight of uncertainty hanging thick in the air. The response came quicker this time. The Vrax's colors shifted, patterns interwoven with an almost cautious grace that suggested they were stepping into the unknown with as much trepidation as the humans. "Looks like they're taking the bait," Harv said, unable to keep the surprise out of his voice. "We're nowhere near out of the woods yet," Selma reminded them, though a smile tugged at her lips. "But it's a start." Alara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "It's working. It's actually working. For now," Rook said, always the realist. "But let's not start celebrating until we know for sure they're not planning to turn us all into cosmic jam." Selma turned to her team, the weight of what they were attempting not lost on her. "This is just the beginning. We've got a long way to go before we can say we're safe." "One small step for humanity," Harv said, raising his mug in mock salute. "One giant leap for our continued survival." Selma chuckled, her resolve firmed up by their small success. "Let's keep punching, folks. We might just have a chance to make it through this." The team settled back into their roles, a newfound determination guiding their actions. The Vrax might have been watching them from a cosmic bleacher, but now, maybe, they were inviting them onto the field. It was a long shot, a gamble against cosmic odds, but if anyone could pull it off, it was them. "So, we're trying to have a heart-to-heart with cosmic bullies who might not know what a heart is," Harv said, eyebrows crawling towards his hairline as he sipped his coffee. "This could either end in a kumbaya or cosmic fireworks." "Exactly," Selma replied, her fingers dancing over the central console while eyeing the screen for any Vrax reaction. "We're playing poker with a universe full of jokers, and our best bluff is human emotion." "Great," chimed Rook, leaning back in his seat. "I always wanted to bet everything on feelings. Who doesn't love a game of galactic emotional roulette?" "Just remember," Selma said, not missing a beat, "it's not about winning, it's about not getting obliterated first." Alara, who was busy fine-tuning the signal to make sure it didn't get lost in the breach's electromagnetic soup, piped up, "I think this might actually work. They've started to mirror our patterns. Like they're trying to sync up." "Oh, lovely," Harv muttered. "The universe's most unpredictable beings want to harmonize with us. What's next, a duet?" Selma shot him a look that was half annoyed, half amused. "Focus, Harv. This isn't some cosmic talent show. If they sync with us, it means they might be trying to understand. Or they're just being polite before they eat us," Rook added, ever the optimist. The main screen flickered again, and this time, the patterns shifted into something more coherent. They weren't words, exactly, but there was a rhythm, a cadence that suggested thought and perhaps a hint of hesitance. Looks like the Vraks have been taking abstract art lessons, Harv said. Are we supposed to clap now? More like try to decipher, Selma replied, her attention fully on the screen. If they're hesitating, it means they're unsure. We can work with that. How do you plan on doing that? Rook asked, genuinely curious. Last I checked, forgiveness and empathy didn't come with a manual. That's where humanity shines, Selma said, a touch of pride in her voice. We're unpredictable, and we've got this crazy thing called forgiveness. If we can show them that, maybe they'll lower their guard. Forgiveness? Harv echoed, incredulous. You want to show forgiveness to the cosmic creeps who've been messing with our reality? That's a harder sell than getting a cat to take a bath. Selma smiled, a wry twist of her lips. Not easy, but it's all we've got. Empathy isn't just our playbook, it's our ace in the hole. If we can demonstrate that to them, we might just shift the balance. Alara nodded enthusiastically. Humans have a knack for this sort of thing. We figure out how to coexist despite our differences. Or we throw things at each other until someone gives up, Rook said dryly. Either way, it's a strategy. Selma crafted the next message, embedding it with subtle signals of reconciliation, curiosity, and the faintest suggestion of peace. It was a gamble, like tossing a coin into a black hole and hoping for a prize. Signals ready, Selma announced. Here goes everything. With a tap, the message surged into the breach, carried by the pulsing energy of hope and a little bit of desperation. The room fell silent, each member of the team holding their breath as they awaited the Vraks' response. Seconds ticked by. Then, the screen shimmered again, the chaos of colors settling into a pattern that was almost comprehensible. Are they? Alara began, leaning forward. Looks like they're responding, Harv said, incredulity giving way to a begrudging respect. But what's the message? Rook squinted at the screen, the patterns flowing into something more structured. I think they're asking why. Why? Selma echoed, her mind racing. Why what? Why we're not trying to annihilate them, probably, Harv suggested. It's not like we haven't got plenty of reason to want them gone. Exactly, Selma said, her excitement building. If they're asking why, it means they don't understand. They're used to hostility, not whatever this is. So, what's the play, coach? Rook asked, the sarcasm slipping into genuine curiosity. How do we explain human empathy to cosmic entities? By showing them, Selma replied, determination set in her jaw. We keep engaging. We show them that understanding is stronger than fear. We use the breach as a bridge, not a battlefield. Sounds like a plan, Alara said, her optimism infectious. Let's show them what humanity's really made of. Heavy on the humanity, light on the destruction, Harv quipped, raising his coffee cup. Here's to hoping they're not allergic to emotions. The next few hours were spent in fevered communication, each message a dance through the breach, a tenuous thread of dialogue woven between realities. The Vraks, despite their fearsome reputation, were responding, their patterns growing more structured, their messages tinged with curiosity. Looks like they're actually listening, Rook remarked, a note of disbelief in his voice. Who would have thought? They're not so different from us, Selma mused, watching as the Vraks' patterns shifted to mimic human structures. They just needed a nudge in the right direction. And here we are, humanity, the cosmic counselors, Harv said, bemused. Next thing you know, we'll be starting a therapy group for interdimensional beings. Well, if they can make peace with us, maybe the universe can start making a little more sense, Alara said, hopeful. Selma nodded, her resolve firm. We've shown them who we are. Now, we wait. The room was quiet, save for the hum of machinery and the distant crackle of static. The Vraks' chaotic colors had settled into a steady, almost serene pattern, a reflection of the newfound understanding between two vastly different worlds. As the moments stretched, the team exchanged glances, the realization dawning that something significant had shifted in the cosmos. The tension that had gripped them for so long began to ease, the weight of uncertainty lifting just a little. And then, the breach began to stabilize. Slowly, imperceptibly, the swirling chaos that had threatened to consume their realities settled into a calm, steady rhythm. It's working, Selma breathed, hardly daring to believe it. The breach is stabilizing. We did it, Alara whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Humanity, 1. Cosmic Chaos, 0, Rook said, a smile tugging at his lips. Harv let out a long breath, his usual stoicism giving way to a grin. Looks like we taught the universe a thing or two about forgiveness. The team stood together, the enormity of their achievement washing over them. They had navigated the chaos, bridged the divide, and found common ground with beings who had once seemed invincible. Here's to humanity, Selma said, raising an imaginary glass. And here's to the universe finally making a bit of sense. The others joined in the imaginary toast, laughter bubbling up amidst the relief and joy. They had faced the chaos and emerged victorious, armed only with the power of human empathy and a stubborn refusal to give up. As they celebrated, the breach pulsed gently, a reminder of the fragile peace they had brokered. But for now, it held firm, a testament to the strength of understanding and the power of humanity's capacity for love. Let's keep an eye on things, Selma said, her voice a mix of caution and hope. We've taken the first step, but there's still a lot we don't know. The others nodded, understanding that their work was far from over. But for now, they had achieved something remarkable, something that would reshape their understanding of the universe and their place within it. And as the cosmos continued its mysterious dance, the team stood ready to face whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that even in the darkest corners of the universe, empathy could light the way. The breach had stabilized, and in its wake, a sort of uneasy tranquility settled over the research base. The clamor of sparking wires and the hum of machinery had not ceased, and yet, amidst the chaos, something fundamental had shifted. Selma stood at the central console, eyeing the now serene patterns on the main screen with a mix of disbelief and relief. It was like staring at a bomb that had inexplicably decided to tick backward. Harv leaned against a nearby console, nursing a coffee that had long since gone cold. Well, that's anticlimactic, he mused, taking a sip and pulling a face. Here I was expecting fireworks and all we get is cosmic counseling. Cheer up, Rook suggested, a smirk in place. You've just witnessed the first interdimensional group therapy session. Next time we'll charge admission. Imagine the Yelp reviews, Selma added dryly, not taking her eyes off the screen. 5 stars would recommend for existential crises. Alara was bustling around, checking systems and ensuring nothing else was about to blow up in their face. I think we can call this a win, she said, her voice upbeat but grounded. The Vraks are actually responding to us. It's like teaching a cat to fetch. Or like convincing Harv to smile, Rook quipped, earning a half-hearted glare from Harv. Hey, don't push it, Harv retorted, almost cracking a grin. I might just be convinced we're not all doomed yet. Their back and forth was typical, a comforting rhythm that had carried them through the madness. Yet the reality of their achievement was beginning to sink in. They had done it. Humanity, with all its flaws and unpredictability, had reached out across the cosmic divide and found understanding. What's next? Alara asked, checking the last of the diagnostics before plopping down on a chair. Do we just sit around, twiddling our thumbs while the Vraks make peace banners? More like we keep them occupied so they don't get bored and decide to start poking reality again, Selma replied, her fingers dancing across the console. We need to maintain communication. Make sure they stay on this new, less destructive path. Rook raised an eyebrow. So, we're babysitters for cosmic toddlers? Neat. Well, someone's gotta do it, Harv said with a shrug. Besides, this beats the hell out of getting obliterated. As the banter continued, Selma found herself reflecting on the absurdity of it all. Here they were, a ragtag team of scientists and cynics, tasked with keeping interdimensional peace. Not exactly what she'd signed up for, but when the universe handed you chaos, you made slightly less chaotic chaos. At least the breach isn't threatening to swallow us whole anymore, Alara pointed out, ever the optimist. That's an improvement. True, Rook conceded, though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed about missing out on that cosmic fireworks show. Selma chuckled, shaking her head. Somehow, I think we'll have plenty more opportunities for excitement. The universe has a way of keeping things interesting. And by interesting, you mean perilous and likely to cause premature aging? Harv asked, finishing his cold coffee with a grimace. Exactly, Selma said, her grin returning. But hey, at least it keeps us on our toes. Just then, a new series of patterns flickered across the main screen, pulling their attention back to the Vraks. This time, the patterns were more complex, infused with a kind of tentative warmth that was as surprising as it was encouraging. "Looks like the Vraks are sending us a cosmic thank you card," Alara observed, her eyes wide with wonder. "Who knew they were capable of gratitude?" "I'm still betting they have no idea what that word means," Rook commented. "But hey, if it keeps them from turning our reality into a pretzel, I'm all for it." "Gratitude or not, this is progress," Selma said firmly. "If we can keep this dialogue going, we might actually build something lasting." Harv snorted. "A lasting relationship with cosmic beings who could erase us with a thought." "Yeah, why not? It's not like we have better options." "Welcome to humanity," Selma replied with a wry smile, always managing to make friends in the strangest places. The base hummed around them, the machinery settling into a steady rhythm that mirrored the newfound peace. It was a precarious balance, sure, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start was all you needed. "So, what's the plan?" Rook asked, crossing his arms. "We just keep chatting with the Vraks until they decide to invite us over for tea?" "Something like that," Selma replied, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to maintain the connection. Make sure they understand that we're committed to this peace." "And if they decide to flip the switch back to chaos?" Harv asked, ever the skeptic. "Then we adapt," Selma said, meeting his gaze with a steady determination. "That's what we do, isn't it? We adapt, we survive, we keep going." Harv nodded slowly, a grudging respect in his eyes. "Fair enough. Here's to cosmic babysitting, then." With a collective chuckle, the team settled back into their routines, each of them acutely aware of the responsibility that had fallen into their laps. It wasn't the life they had envisioned, but it was theirs, and they'd be damned if they didn't make the most of it. As the hours ticked by, the Vraks continued to reach out, their messages growing more complex and nuanced. It was a dance of understanding, a tentative exploration of what it meant to coexist. And for the first time, it felt like they were truly being heard. "Looks like they're curious about us," Alara remarked, pointing to a sequence on the screen that resembled a question. "Probably wondering why we're so keen on not getting obliterated," Rook said with a smirk. "Can't say I blame them. We're not exactly the sanest bunch." "Speak for yourself," Harv replied with a mock glare. "Some of us are doing just fine, thank you." Selma watched the exchange with a smile, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and hope. They had come so far, faced so much, and yet here they were, on the brink of something extraordinary. "Let's keep at it," she said, drawing their attention back to the task at hand. "We've opened the door, now we just need to figure out how to keep it open." "Sounds like a plan," Rook agreed, pulling up a chair. "Let's show the universe what we're made of." And so, they continued, weaving a tapestry of dialogue and understanding, each thread a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. It was a shaky peace, a fragile alliance, but it was theirs, and for now, that was enough. As the day wore on, the base settled into a new rhythm, the chaos and uncertainty of the past few days giving way to a cautious optimism. The Vraks, once feared and misunderstood, were beginning to reveal a side that was almost relatable. Who knew cosmic entities could be so chatty? Alara mused, shaking her head in wonder. "Maybe they're just lonely," Harv suggested. "Stuck in their own little dimension with nothing but chaos for company." "Guess we make for interesting pen pals." "Point is," Selma interjected, "we've made progress. We've shown them that there's more to life than destruction and chaos. And we've shown ourselves that we can handle whatever the universe throws at us," Rook added, his voice tinged with awe. The realization settled over them like a comforting weight, the enormity of their accomplishment finally sinking in. They had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, armed with nothing more than their tenacity and a willingness to understand. "So, what now?" Harv asked, breaking the contemplative silence. "Do we just keep doing this forever?" "Maybe," Selma replied, turning her gaze back to the screen. "Or maybe we find new challenges, new ways to keep the peace." "Either way, we're in this together," Alara said, her voice filled with conviction. "We've proven that much." And so they were, a motley crew of scientists and skeptics, bound by a shared mission and the knowledge that they had changed the universe, however slightly. It was a daunting task, but one they faced with open hearts and unwavering resolve. "Here's to the future," Selma said, raising her imaginary glass once more. "Whatever it may hold." The others joined in, their laughter mingling with the hum of machinery as they toasted to the unknown. They had forged a new path, one of understanding and cooperation, and for now, that was enough. As the breach remained stable and the Vraks continued to reach out, the team stood ready, their minds and hearts open to the possibilities that lay ahead. The universe was unpredictable, a constant dance of chaos and order, but they had learned to navigate it with grace and humor. And as they looked to the future, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, armed with the power of empathy and the indomitable spirit of humanity.